You don't look like you belong in that seat. That was the first thing Claire Donovan, the lead flight attendant, said as she stared down at Dr. Vanessa Reynolds, seated calmly in 1A. Claire didn't whisper, didn't lower her voice. She said it with her back straight, chin high, and a smile so faint it barely concealed the scorn behind it. Around them. The first-class cabin hummed with forced civility, porcelain cups rattled against saucers as turbulence gently nudged the aircraft. But the real disturbance had already begun. Just before we go any further, I'd love to know where are you watching from today and if these stories speak to you. Don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is something special, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. And if you've ever faced something like this yourself, feel free to share your story in the comments below. We're listening. Dr. Reynolds looked up slowly, lifting her gaze from the sleek Nexus tablet resting on her lap, which moments earlier had displayed her draft speech on equitable technology in aviation. She didn't answer Claire's accusation immediately. Instead, she blinked once, then twice, letting the weight of the moment settle before replying in a voice steady and low. "This is my assigned seat. You may want to double-check your manifest." Claire didn't move. Instead, she extended a printed boarding pass, one that read 23B, a center seat in economy class, toward Vanessa with fingers pinched tight, like she was holding something dirty. "We've had a change," she said. "You'll need to relocate." Bradley Sumner, a passenger seated in 1B, leaned slightly toward the aisle without bothering to hide his amusement. "Honestly," he said with a smirk, "first class used to mean something." Vanessa didn't flinch. Her voice remained calm, but now carried an edge of precision. "There's been no change. That seat was issued to me directly by Horizon's corporate office, and I strongly advise you to walk this back before you make a costly mistake." Claire turned slightly, not toward compliance, but toward escalation. "Ma'am, your tone isn't helping. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." At that moment, Ryan Holt, the cabin supervisor, approached holding a company tablet. He tapped a few times, then looked up and said, "It looks like there's a booking discrepancy. Our system isn't verifying her in this cabin." With a flick of his finger, he updated the crew log passenger 1A, flagged for reassignment due to ticket error. Marissa Tate, an influencer seated in 3C, overheard the exchange and was already raising her phone to record. "Wow," she whispered with a performative tone. "Chaos in first class. This is why they should screen better." Vanessa folded her hands in her lap and gave Claire one final look. "You're going to regret this moment," she said. Claire rolled her eyes. "We hear that a lot." Then came the second insult. Claire leaned in and whispered just loud enough for others to hear. "This cabin is reserved for premium guests, platinum, executive tier, and up. I'm sure you understand." Before Vanessa could respond, Ryan added, "We'll escort her if needed. This can't disrupt the other passengers." Bradley, unable to resist, chuckled and said under his breath, "Must have slipped through some loophole." Vanessa turned her head slowly, catching the eyes of Sofia Alvarez in 1C, who had up to this point stayed silent but was clearly disturbed by what she was witnessing. Vanessa didn't look angry. She looked calculating. Kendra Miles, a Nexus analyst seated in 2A, had already pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly, a row behind her. Jaden Pierce, Nexus's cybersecurity specialist, was syncing a discrete device to Horizon's internal crew system. In 3B, NBC journalist Malik Jordan activated a live microphone clipped to his shirt. The network had asked him to follow Vanessa discreetly for a human interest piece. He didn't expect the piece to start at 35,000 feet. Vanessa's tablet buzzed softly. It was a message from Elena Ruiz, CFO of Nexus Technologies. "We're tracking this live. Want us to engage? Vanessa responded with a single word. Stand by. Claire, clearly still holding power in her mind. Attempted insult number 3, you know, she said with a fake smile. We've had passengers try to sneak into first class before. It's always awkward when we have to correct them, but protocol is protocol. Todd Granger, the onboard tech coordinator who had been quietly scanning data logs on a company-issued device, suddenly chimed in from behind. Her account shows a non-standard routing. Might be fraudulent. Marissa, still filming, added her own commentary. Honestly, if this woman were really a CEO, she wouldn't be arguing with flight staff. Vanessa sat back in her seat and turned off her tablet, folding it shut with deliberate calm. Are you sure, she asked, that you want to keep digging this hole in front of a live audience? Ryan frowned and typed a final note into the crew app. Passenger 1A remove upon landing, flag as non-compliant. Then came insult number 4. Marissa lowered her phone, leaned forward slightly, and asked, Are you trying to make this about race? Because that would be really unfortunate, Claire added. Let's just be reasonable. You're making the other guests uncomfortable. A few heads nodded in quiet agreement, not because they knew what was right, but because they were afraid of being associated with the wrong side of authority. Vanessa's voice didn't rise, but it gained weight. Uncomfortable is watching professionals lie in unison. Uncomfortable is witnessing discrimination dressed as policy. Ryan reached toward her screen again, and this time Jaden Pierce's system lit up. He whispered toward Kendra. They're logging her out of the onboard network. Screen lock and data suppression are live. Kendra texted Vanessa immediately. They're burying your record. We're mirroring the feed now. Malik, speaking in a hushed tone for NBC, said into his lapel. First-class seating dispute may be evolving into a civil rights violation. Footage rolling at that exact moment. Vanessa quietly pulled out a slim silver device and placed a call through Nexus's encrypted satellite channel. Elena, she said, run a check on Horizon's bias compliance. Pull Claire Donovan, Ryan Holt, and Todd Granger. I want status on all 3. A pause. Then Elena's voice returned. Claire and Ryan both failed last year's equity protocol. They weren't supposed to be in rotation for executive-tier flights. Todd's running unauthorized diagnostics. Vanessa exhaled slowly, her expression unchanged. Thank you. Keep that ready. Across the aisle. Sophia finally spoke, her voice soft but pointed. This doesn't feel right. Vanessa turned toward her, offering a nod of acknowledgement but saying nothing. She didn't need to. The wheel had already begun to turn, and those who had pushed hardest were about to feel it shift beneath them. And still, none of them not Claire, not Ryan, not Todd, and certainly not Marissa knew who they had just tried to erase. They didn't know the woman in seat 1A had written the very protocols Horizon claimed to follow. They didn't know that her company powered half the flight systems on this aircraft. They didn't know that, in less than 15 minutes, she would end a billion-dollar deal without ever raising her voice. But they would. The cabin dimmed without warning, and just as the aircraft rocked in a sudden pocket of turbulence, the overhead lights flickered and died completely, leaving only the aisle floor lights glowing faintly in rows of red and white. A gasp swept across first class, not from the darkness alone, but from the sharp voice that followed it. We have a security concern in first class, Claire announced, flashlight in hand, her beam landing squarely on Vanessa Reynolds' face as if she were spotlighting a suspect, not a seated guest. Her words weren't instructions, they were accusations, and they carried weight because no one in the cabin, except perhaps a few quietly observant allies, knew yet who Vanessa truly was. We're addressing a potential threat to the cabin, Ryan Holt added, confirming Claire's statement on the crew comms system, typing swiftly into the airline's internal app. Todd Granger, seated a few rows back, looked up from his tablet and offered a cold shrug. Passenger in 1A has irregular tech in her lap. He muttered, could be a data risk or tampering. Vanessa didn't move, but her voice was firm. The only threat here is your pattern of misconduct, and I suggest you document everything you're doing right now because I am Bradley, emboldened by the darkness and confusion. Took it further. She's been messing with her tablet the whole time. What if she's interfering with the aircraft? You people need to take her seriously before something happens. That was insult 5, and it didn't pass unnoticed. Sofia Alvarez turned quickly, her voice sharp but composed. She's been sitting calmly, reviewing her notes. The only thing she's interfering with is your comfort zone. Claire spun on Sofia without hesitation, saying, Ma'am, I'll need you to remain silent unless spoken to by crew. We're managing a sensitive situation. Behind them. Marissa Tate was already filming again. This time with dramatic narration added complete darkness up here in first class. And one very agitated passenger is making the whole cabin nervous. This is what you get when standards are lowered. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly, not in frustration, but in calculation. Her hands rested neatly on her knees as she replied, You should be very careful with your words. Ms. Tate, you're documenting your own failure of character. Todd, who had been monitoring the device profiles linked to the cabin's secure network, suddenly flagged Vanessa's tablet as hazardous in the crew system and turned his screen toward Ryan. Just did a forced disconnect. Let's isolate the device. Diane Kessler, the in-flight manager who had previously stayed silent, stepped forward and whispered something to Claire. Then, she spoke loudly enough for all to hear. We have to treat this as a potential security breach. Ms. Reynolds, please surrender your carry-on for inspection. Vanessa's reply was even and unshaken. You are not law enforcement. You have no grounds and no consent. And just so you're aware, you've already been recorded issuing slanderous claims on a federal aircraft. Claire's jaw tensed. Ryan whispered again into his mic. Passenger is escalating. Possible detainment on landing. That was insult number 6. A man seated in 4A shouted toward the galley. If she's got something suspicious, why is she still sitting there? The energy shifted from passive judgment to visible fear, engineered by the very crew tasked with maintaining trust. Todd, pushing things further, input a fabricated report that flagged Vanessa's account as triggering a cabin alert. He turned to Claire and said, I sent a message to Ops claimed she was showing signs of technical interference. It'll give us cover if this goes sideways. Behind them. Diane nodded grimly, saying, If this comes back to us, we blame a system misfire. Vanessa, still seated, glanced to her left where Jaden was typing quickly, his brow tight with focus. He looked up and gave her a subtle nod. Within seconds, his secure device intercepted a group chat on the Horizon crew platform that included Ryan, Diane, and Todd. The message thread read, Make her look unstable. Don't use race. But you know what I mean. Use first-class policy language. Jaden's screen lit up. He quietly passed the message to Kendra in 2A, who forwarded the image to Elena Ruiz, Nexus's CFO. Elena responded instantly with a short line. We're ready. Go when you're clear. Back in the cabin. Malik Jordan began streaming again, quietly updating his audience on NBC News' online feed. We're now receiving internal documents confirming that discriminatory communication may be occurring mid-flight. His voice remained calm, but viewers were growing hundreds of thousands tuning in by the minute. That was insult 7, and it would be the last before the tide turned. Bradley, louder now and more brazen in the dark, shouted, What are we even waiting for if she's got something dangerous? Throw her off this plane. Horizon is for real VIPs, not people like her. Vanessa slowly opened her carry-on, retrieved a slim card the size of a hotel key, and held it against the back of her now disabled tablet. Every log, every comms exchange, every flag you triggered this device archived all of it, and that includes the order to falsify a threat. Ryan moved toward her quickly. But Evan Brooks, the pilot, now entering the cabin from the front with his flight log in hand, raised a hand to stop him. "We've had enough accusations in here," Evan said. "I've seen the feeds, and I just got word from dispatch someone leaked a comms thread to Bloomberg. The cabin stilled. Even Claire stopped moving." Vanessa looked down at her screen, then up at Evan, and said softly, "You're about to see exactly how deep this goes." At that moment, Kendra's phone buzzed. She turned the screen toward Vanessa. It was live. Bloomberg headline, "Leaked chat reveals airlines' elite passenger protocols may be racially biased." Underneath it, a post from Sophia had gone viral on Reddit. "I saw it with my own eyes. Black woman in first class targeted for no reason. Whole crew participated." Within 5 minutes, the post crossed 1 million views. In the same breath, Malik's feed climbed past 6,000 concurrent viewers. Jaden whispered, "We've got the app chat mirrored. Full logs. They can't walk this back." And then came the twist. Vanessa leaned back, checked her watch, and opened a secure folder from Nexus's legal division titled Horizon Contracts, Termination Protocols. Diane, who had once spoken with such certainty, took a step back. "You don't have the authority to." Vanessa looked at her, eyes calm and sharp. "You never asked who I am, but you're about to find out." The cabin didn't erupt. It froze. The storm outside the windows was distant now. The real turbulence was here between seat rows, in streaming feeds, inside private corporate chat threads being pulled apart by a woman they had just tried to push out of view. When the cabin lights finally flickered back on, they didn't return to calm, they lit up chaos. The in-flight entertainment screens glitched in unison for half a second, then displayed scrambled fragments of what appeared to be internal crew messages, flashing words like invalid, risk, reroute, and contain. Several passengers gasped, while others began whispering in alarm, unsure whether it was a system error or something far worse. Vanessa Reynolds remained seated in 1A, her posture composed, but her presence now unmistakably commanding. The crew had spent the last 30 minutes trying to erase her, but each step they took had broadcast their own misconduct to an audience far beyond the aircraft. Diane Kessler, the in-flight manager who had already lost control of the narrative, panicked. She stormed to the intercom and made an abrupt announcement. "We are addressing a confirmed disturbance in first class. Please remain calm and seated." But her voice cracked on the word confirmed, and that tiny fracture spread through the cabin like a signal flare. People turned in their seats, many pulling out phones, others whispering, wondering who or what the threat really was. Then came the 8th insult. From just behind Vanessa, Marissa Tate, still filming from 3C, hurled a pen that bounced against Vanessa's shoulder and landed in the aisle. "You're no CEO," she spat. "You're a fraud in heels playing pretend." Claire Donovan, emboldened by Diane's announcement, stepped in quickly and locked Vanessa's profile from the flight system entirely, whispering, "You're not just being moved anymore, you're being erased." Bradley, who had grown louder with every delay, stood up halfway in his seat and shouted, "This is first class. It's for winners, not whoever she is. Kick her out before she ruins the flight." Passengers around him murmured but did nothing. Paralyzed by a strange blend of doubt and guilt, Ryan Holt nodded at Todd Granger, who silently flagged Vanessa's presence in the cabin as unauthorized on the digital manifest and triggered a system alert to suggest she had never boarded at all. "Security is being notified," Todd whispered with a smirk. Vanessa didn't rise. She didn't need to. She reached for her tablet, reactivated it through Nexus's private network, and in a single move, slipped a small encrypted USB into Malik Jordan's hand. "Get this to Bloomberg," she said calmly. If they try to spin this, we'll make sure the truth speaks louder. Malik, stunned by the direct order but understanding its weight, immediately turned to Jaden Pierce, who nodded and said, "We've got it. Patching it through now." That was insult number 9, and it came hard and fast. Diane, speaking directly into her headset connected to Horizon's main dispatch line, said, "Passenger 1A is now considered combative. Possible tampering with sensitive devices. Recommend law enforcement meet upon landing," Claire added. She threatened the crew earlier. It's on record. Marissa updated her post on social media in real-time. Fake CEO tries to hijack first class. Flight crew heroically responds. Vanessa took one breath and replied quietly, "This will age very poorly for all of you." But it was insult 10 that finally snapped the last thread holding public pretense together. As Claire moved to physically disconnect Vanessa's seat controls, locking her tray table, disabling her power port, Diane called out to passengers, "For your safety, please do not engage with the individual in 1A. A man in 4C added, "Is she dangerous or something?" And Marissa, gleefully updating her feed, said, "Watch her try to sue. That's what they always do when they're caught." Vanessa turned slowly to face the front of the cabin, raised her tablet just slightly, and mirrored the crew chat history across all the screens in the first-class section. In real time, everyone around her could see the digital thread make her look unstable, push her to economy, discredit the footage. Then came the large twist. Kendra Miles, seated in 2A, had spent the last 15 minutes decrypting Horizon's behavior monitoring algorithm, the very program Nexus Technologies had licensed to the airline under strict conditions. What she discovered made her sit back in disbelief. "Vanessa," she said, leaning forward, "it's not just them. The system is tagging black passengers disproportionately. It's built into the AI routing." Jaden confirmed from 2C. "It's embedded in the learning model. They've been letting it auto-prioritize passengers by race cloaked as behavioral risk scores." Vanessa nodded, saying, "Broadcast it." Within seconds, Kendra uploaded the logs to Bloomberg's editorial line. The headline dropped within 2 minutes. Leaked source: Horizon Airlines passenger system flags. Black travelers for security risk at 4x the rate. By the 3rd minute, the in-flight Wi-Fi was flooded. Screens across the cabin flickered again, not with crew messages, but with a breaking news alert from Bloomberg. Passengers who had been silent began gasping, some speaking up, others staring at Vanessa as if seeing her for the first time. Malik's NBC stream ticked past 600,000 viewers. Sophia Alvarez posted a full Reddit thread documenting what she'd seen with photos, timestamps, and quotes. Her thread hit 1 million views within 4 minutes. Todd Granger stood and tried to shut down the system override, but Jaden had already rerouted access control through Nexus's emergency firmware. "You can't stop it," he said, not smugly, but with certainty. "The truth's already up there." Claire looked around the cabin, her expression now tinged with real fear. Ryan stood frozen, his fingers hovering above his screen. Diane whispered to Victor Langston, Horizon's CEO, over her headset, "We've got a problem. She's not just a passenger." Vanessa opened a folder on her tablet marked Contract Termination Protocol. She tapped once, paused, then tapped again. Not anymore. She said, "Now I'm your problem." The screen blinked green. Elena Ruiz's name appeared at the top. Confirmation contract termination initiated. The cabin, the crew, the airline, none of them were prepared for what came next. By the time Horizon Airlines' internal network received confirmation that Dr. Vanessa Reynolds had initiated the contract termination, chaos had already begun to ripple far beyond the first-class cabin of Flight 227. At Horizon's headquarters in Chicago, the executive floor was in a state of controlled panic. The company's CEO, Victor Langston, stood frozen in front of a wall of monitors in the crisis response room, each screen showing a different platform, Bloomberg flashing the leak headline, NBC's live stream rapidly climbing toward 1 million viewers, Reddit exploding with witness accounts, and the Horizon app itself suffering a sudden cascade of login failures. "Where is this coming from?" Victor barked, turning to his chief legal officer, whose eyes betrayed the one thing no executive ever wanted to admit he didn't know. "It's coming from within the aircraft," the COO replied, voice tense. "It appears that someone with admin access her most likely initiated a lockdown protocol through the Nexus architecture. We can't override it without triggering a system breach warning across every partner airline." Diane Kessler's voice broke through on a secure call, patching in from the aircraft. "Victor, it's her. She's got something." She mirrored the crew logs. The passengers saw everything. Victor clenched his jaw, scanning the screen showing Vanessa's face from the pilot's forward camera. She's not just a CEO. She's orchestrating this in real time. Then the airline's booking system crashed completely. Customers from multiple time zones began reporting that they couldn't access their tickets. The automated support lines went down. At major hubs like JFK, LAX, and Dallas-Fort Worth, check-in counters showed blank status boards. The system Horizon had once praised as unbreachable was now paralyzed. Onboard Flight 227 Todd Granger frantically attempted to re-access the back end through a maintenance portal, only to be locked out with a flashing message, "Access denied." Contract voided. Nexus control initiated. He turned pale, then whispered to Ryan Holt, "It's her system. She's not just a client. She built the architecture. She can do this legally." Ryan didn't speak. He couldn't. His hands shook as he glanced around the cabin, now eerily quiet, except for the occasional whisper from shocked passengers trying to piece together what was happening. Claire, standing in the galley, tapped Diane on the shoulder and asked, "Should we detain her?" Diane shook her head. "If you touch her now, we'll be on CNN before we land." In seat 1A, Vanessa remained composed, watching each development unfold on her private feed. Lila Chen, Nexus's legal counsel, texted a brief update. FAA notified. "DOJ just acknowledged receipt of your materials. Victor's board is panicking," Vanessa replied with a single phrase, "Let them sweat." Meanwhile, Kendra Miles updated a secure server log showing how Horizon had repeatedly ignored flagged bias reports in its AI passenger system, choosing instead to suppress data that showed discriminatory profiling. Nexus's team had long suspected the misuse, but now, with the live feed, public exposure, and internal sabotage all visible at once, the evidence had become undeniable. Then came the very large twist. Todd, in desperation, tried a hard reboot on the flight's localized Nexus platform, an unauthorized action he hoped would reset the onboard systems and cut off Vanessa's control. But instead of restoring function, the system locked into what Nexus engineers called deep shield mode. The moment Todd forced the override, every Horizon-connected database linked to the platform was frozen for safety protocol. This meant not just Flight 227, but every domestic and international Horizon aircraft using Nexus tech lost its live booking, communication sync, and passenger flow for over 13 minutes. Vanessa looked up, her voice calm as she leaned slightly toward Claire and said, "You just shut down your entire fleet at Horizon headquarters." Victor Langston watched in horror as over 120 flights across the country went into operational pause. Crew check-ins stalled, gate assignments dropped, and emergency reports began flooding in, not of danger, but of paralysis. "We can't reassign crew. We can't verify boarding passes." An operations manager shouted, "Everything's frozen." On Vanessa's screen, a new message appeared from Elena CNN live in 5 minutes. "Confirm if we proceed with disclosure to FAA Equity Board and partner airlines." Vanessa tapped twice, locking the response in. The full story crew misconduct, tech sabotage, racial profiling algorithms, and Horizon's violation of equity regulations was about to become a federal headline. Diane tried one last time to salvage the situation. She stepped forward and whispered to Vanessa, "If you undo this, we can talk. We can fix this quietly." Vanessa's reply came without hesitation. "You only want quiet because the truth makes noise. You had your chance when you told me I didn't belong in this seat." Malik Jordan's voice on the live stream returned. And just like that, a billion-dollar contract is gone. What we're witnessing isn't just corporate failure, it's a digital reckoning. Broadcast live from 35,000 feet. Passengers across the cabin, including those who had remained silent earlier, now sat frozen, their eyes not on the crew, but on Vanessa, no longer the disruptive woman in 1A, but a figure of poise, strength, and unstoppable consequence. Kendra's final update appeared on Vanessa's screen. System-wide freeze confirmed. DOJ statement incoming. Internal Horizon Equity report leaked. Vanessa breathed in deeply, then turned to the window. The clouds outside rolled on in silence, unaware of the storm she had just unleashed below. The cabin had shifted from outrage to silence, not the passive silence of people who didn't care, but the kind that comes when a room finally realizes it has witnessed something irreversible. Across first class, screens were still flashing, Bloomberg headlines cycling on loop, NBC's live stream running unfiltered commentary, and overhead lights casting long shadows over people who just an hour ago had dismissed the woman in seat 1A as a mistake. Now they knew they weren't looking at a mistake, they were looking at the architect of their undoing. Victor Langston, patched into the cabin via a secured line from Horizon's executive conference room, appeared on a small monitor beside the flight attendant jump seat. His voice came through tight and short. "Dr. Reynolds, we are aware of your actions, and we urge you to reconsider terminating our contract." His tone tried for diplomacy, but the desperation behind it was thinly veiled. Vanessa Reynolds didn't flinch. She adjusted her seat upright, folded her hands calmly, and replied, "This isn't a negotiation. Your flight crew falsified records, attempted public humiliation, slandered my name, misused proprietary technology, and reinforced a discriminatory system you knew existed. The question isn't whether I'll reverse the cancellation. The question is how many people you're willing to fire in order to keep the airline from collapse." Victor hesitated, and then tried to deflect. "Perhaps we can de-escalate. I can speak to your legal team. Get this resolved," Vanessa cut in, "then start by firing Claire Donovan, Ryan Holt, Diane Kessler, and Todd Granger. And I want public bans issued against Bradley Sumner and Marissa Tate, immediately, or the termination proceeds without delay." Diane, still standing just behind Vanessa's row, snapped, "You don't have the authority to make demands like that on this aircraft." Vanessa turned and looked at her not with anger, but with a depth of knowing that silenced Diane before she could speak again. "You still don't know who I am," Vanessa said quietly, "but that's about to change." She tapped her tablet once, and NBC's stream split screen to an exclusive segment prepared by Lila Chen, Nexus Technologies' general counsel. The image of Vanessa appeared on every cabin screen, introduced not only as CEO of Nexus, but as the primary architect of the FAA's equity compliance policy, a policy Horizon Airlines had violated publicly, systematically, and in her direct presence. Passengers who had once glanced away now leaned forward. Those who had laughed or whispered now sat frozen in shame. Even Evan Brooks, the pilot, who had quietly observed from the cockpit doorway, gave a slight nod of respect as the reveal spread like wildfire across every device. "You're Dr. Vanessa Reynolds?" Victor asked, visibly stunned. You wrote the regulation package, I wrote the part your legal department pretended to adopt. She answered, and now I'm watching you violate it in real time. Lila's voice entered the stream, calm and lethal. Based on the evidence gathered mid-flight, including falsified crew logs, racially coded system flags, and verbal misconduct, Horizon has violated multiple federal transportation standards. As of now, all cooperation with Nexus Technologies has ceased. Recovery options are no longer on the table. In Seat 3C, Marissa Tate's face drained of color as her name appeared in real time under the heading, Public Ban Issued Marissa Tate, Permanent Exclusion from Horizon First Class. Bradley stood abruptly, demanding to speak, but Diane simply shook her head and turned away. Ryan Holt, once smug and unbothered, leaned back into his jump seat with his head down, knowing the cameras were capturing every twitch of his jaw. Then came the firings, live, one by one. Their names were read by Horizon's legal chief on NBC's connected audio stream, Claire Donovan, terminated; Ryan Holt, terminated; Diane Kessler, terminated; Todd Granger, terminated, with each name. The first-class cabin exhaled a little more. Passengers who had sat in uncomfortable silence now whispered not out of gossip, but relief. Justice, real and immediate, was happening in front of them. Marissa fumbled with her phone, trying to explain. I didn't mean it like that. I was just reporting what I saw. Her voice cracked, and no one responded. Bradley muttered curses under his breath, grabbing his coat. Claire turned to Vanessa once more, softer this time, almost pleading. We didn't know who you were. Vanessa answered without looking at her. You didn't care who I was. Then, just as the cabin seemed to settle into resolution, came the extreme twist. Lila's voice re-entered the stream with a final update. TMZ has just released a backdated post from Marissa Tate's account, showing a private message she sent 2 days ago mocking Horizon's new diversity protocol. That message has since been deleted, but it was recovered. The cabin screens lit up with a screenshot of the message. I hope they stop pretending CEOs look like her. The backlash was instant. Thousands of viewers flooded Horizon support channels demanding action. Vanessa, however, did not gloat. Instead, she turned her tablet toward Ryan, whose face was pale and still. You get one option, she said gently but firmly. Retraining under Nexus's equity compliance program. No titles, no shortcuts. You either face your bias or you disappear behind it. Ryan swallowed hard and nodded. I accept. The tension lifted not through punishment, but through possibility, the possibility of reform. Even after humiliation. Malik Jordan spoke into the NBC stream, his voice rich with meaning. She could have stayed silent. She could have let it slide. But today, one woman made the system listen and made it change mid-air. As the aircraft continued westward, the sun began to set against the clouds, casting long gold across the wings. Vanessa leaned back, not victorious, but steady because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new altitude. In the days that followed the mid-air reckoning, the aviation world found itself forced into a moment of collective reflection, a moment sparked by one woman's refusal to move from her seat and her refusal to stay silent. Vanessa Reynolds did not return to headlines with fire and fury. Instead, she returned with precision, releasing a new initiative through Nexus Technologies called Nexus Equity, a sweeping platform designed to reform how airlines use technology to assess passengers. The initiative introduced mandatory equity checks in AI design, system transparency protocols for crew reporting tools, and a certification process that required every participating airline to submit to quarterly independent audits. Horizon Airlines, battered by public outcry and hemorrhaging both passengers and credibility, became the first to adopt it, not out of altruism, but survival. With their stock down nearly 40%, bookings at their lowest in 15 years, and multiple class action suits filed by passengers who were on Flight 227, the airline's board voted unanimously to partner with Nexus and to place all flight personnel under new training directives drafted by Vanessa's team. As part of the reform, passengers like Sofia Alvarez, who had spoken up mid-flight, were invited to join Horizon's Public Oversight Council, a volunteer board of everyday travelers tasked with reviewing complaints and proposing new ethical guidelines. Sofia's first Reddit post had reached over 10 million views. Now, her name appeared next to Vanessa's on community panels streamed by major media outlets, where they spoke not just about that flight, but about every silent moment in countless other cabins that had gone unchecked. The transformation didn't stop there. Jaden Pierce, who had quietly intercepted and exposed Horizon's discriminatory crew chats, was brought on to lead Nexus's Transparency AI division. Kendra Miles, promoted to Executive Director of Passenger Equity Systems, began building a framework for global carriers to detect bias before it surfaced in human behavior. Malik Jordan, whose steady reporting had helped push NBC's coverage into every American living room, was nominated for a National Journalism Award for excellence in investigative reporting. And yet, for all the progress made in the days that followed, it was what Jaden uncovered a week later that forced the industry into crisis mode once more. While reviewing Horizon's back-end infrastructure, Jaden discovered a hidden contract, an unpublicized partnership between Horizon Airlines and a private tech firm specializing in predictive risk algorithms. The contract revealed that Horizon had been testing a third-party AI model, one that prioritized passenger flagging based on behavioral indicators tied to nonverbal disruption, non-conforming appearance, and historical demographic trends. When cross-referenced, these vague categories overwhelmingly pointed toward the disproportionate targeting of Black, brown, and disabled passengers. And the model wasn't limited to Horizon. It had been licensed to 4 other U.S.-based airlines and 2 international carriers. The bombshell report hit NBC and CNN simultaneously, within hours. A congressional committee launched a formal inquiry into biometric profiling in public transportation. Airline executives were subpoenaed. The Department of Transportation released a public memo reaffirming that no passenger should be profiled by code. Vanessa didn't issue a press release. She simply uploaded the findings, line by line, with annotated remarks, onto Nexus's official site under a banner that read, "The code can't be biased if we build it right." That sentence was quoted by over 50 media outlets within 48 hours. Other tech CEOs, some supportive, others quietly defensive, began rewriting their own policies, not because they wanted to, but because they saw what happened when someone like Vanessa chose to act without asking for permission, and amid the growing movement. One quiet moment stood out: a note left on Vanessa's desk from a retired flight attendant, folded in half and written in careful script. It read, "I saw what happened. I saw it too many times and said nothing. Thank you for not sitting quietly." Vanessa kept that note, not for pride, but as a reminder. The skies had always seemed neutral, but neutrality, she knew, is the luxury of those not being pushed out of their seat. In the weeks after the fallout, the names that once held power in that first-class cabin began to vanish from the headlines, not because the world had forgotten, but because the consequences had settled in with quiet finality. Diane Kessler resigned without public comment and was later seen serving as a guest panelist at a seminar on corporate accountability, a move widely viewed as an attempt at rehabilitation. Todd Granger was banned from working with any Nexus-linked system again. His profile flagged for ethics violations. Bradley Sumner, the passenger who had loudly questioned Vanessa's worth, lost a lucrative client portfolio after his remarks on Flight 227 were included in diversity training materials circulated across multiple firms. Marissa Tate's sponsorships were terminated within a week, and her video footage from the flight once intended to ridicule was now being replayed in classrooms as an example of performative bias and digital cruelty. She posted a tearful apology, but it arrived too late to change the public's mind. Horizon Airlines, now rebranded and restructuring, removed her permanently from eligibility across all service classes. But not everyone disappeared. Ryan Holt, once the voice behind false records and whispered sabotage, returned not to first class, but to a Nexus training facility in Seattle, where he enrolled in a 12-week immersive program on ethical decision-making and unconscious bias. He didn't speak to media. He didn't defend his actions. He completed the program quietly and, by the end, asked to stay on as a teaching assistant when Vanessa visited the facility 6 months later. She paused when she saw him. He stood, lowered his head slightly, and said only, "I'm still unlearning." Vanessa didn't offer him absolution, but she offered something close. "Then keep doing it," she said, and walked on. That act of grace became a footnote in several articles, quietly mentioned but deeply felt by readers who understood the difference between retribution and reform. Vanessa had not set out to punish. She had set out to reveal and once exposed. She believed the system should decide who was worth saving and who needed to be let go. Kendra, Jaden, Sophia, Malik, Lila, and Evan, the team that stood with her, remained connected even after the storm passed. Each had played a role in not just preserving Vanessa's dignity, but elevating a moment of injustice into a public reckoning that reshaped how an industry would operate. Under their guidance, Nexus Equity was adopted by 7 other major carriers within 3 months, and regulators began working directly with Nexus engineers to ensure AI systems used in transportation met ethical review standards. The FAA publicly acknowledged Vanessa's impact in a televised summit, where she gave a speech that didn't mention the flight, the crew, or the humiliation. Instead, she spoke about silence and how easily it grows when left unchallenged. The final twist came when Claire Donovan, the first voice of disrespect on that flight, submitted a formal apology. It was written without legal prompting, not edited by PR, and included a line that took many by surprise. "I said those words because I thought power looked a certain way. I was wrong. You didn't raise your voice, and I still heard you." Vanessa didn't respond publicly, but the apology went viral, not because of its eloquence, but because of what came next. Ryan Holt, now serving as a guest instructor at a Nexus symposium, read the letter aloud at a panel called "When Bias Meets Accountability" and followed it with the line, "This was written by the woman who once told someone they didn't belong in first class, and now she's trying to learn how to sit in her own seat." The audience gave no applause, just quiet nods, and that was enough. The skies didn't change overnight, but they began to feel different. The way crews engaged with passengers, the way systems flagged alerts, the way people looked at each other across the aisle. A shift had begun, and it came not from regulation, but from someone refusing to accept humiliation as routine. And now, before this story ends, let me ask you, where are you watching from? Have you ever been told you don't belong at a table, in a seat, or in a room you worked hard to enter? If this story reminded you of something buried in silence, don't keep it there. Share it, speak it, write it, because change doesn't come from the loudest voices. It comes from the ones who choose to stay seated and make the world stand still.